Welcome into the Simmons Scoop with Chad Simmons. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, and we have the Director of Recruiting here at On3, Chad Simmons here himself. He's been on the road. He's been on the ground at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge in Indianapolis, so we're going to get into some of that intel. But first, we got to talk a little Georgia recruiting. Let's bring in Chad Simmons. We've seen a bunch of commitments. Ekene Agboko, Kamari Brooks, Jay Lamar just moments ago made his decision committing to Georgia right here on the On3 Recruit channel. And there could be more. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, we know Georgia isn't happy with just one elite back. They want two, and they're eyeing up Derek Cooper out of Miami, Florida. But Derek Cooper is not going to be an easy pull out of the Sunshine State. Where do you think Georgia stands with them right now?
No, not at all. Definitely not an easy pull from South Florida down there, obviously in Miami's backyard, to the OV to Miami this past weekend. They got the last shot at the elite running back, Derek Cooper, and we think Miami's going to be tough to beat, but Georgia's one that could potentially beat the Hurricanes in this race. They're very much in competition here and a strong contender with Coach Crawford and Coach Coley, Bobo, Smart, a lot of guys involved in that recruitment. He's been to Athens 4, 5, 6 times. Mom's been there. She likes the coaching staff. She's a big part of this recruitment. Obviously, it's Derek's decision in the end, but she's right there in the group that will help him get there to the finish line. Like you said, Jay Lamar, huge win for Georgia. They want to add another piece in that running back room. I believe Derek Cooper is their best shot. Of course, Savion Hyder's involved, other running backs, Amari Latimer, but Cooper is a guy coming off the board in July. They're very much in play, making that pitch to be that two-headed monster like a Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall. And like you said, Georgia's had a lot of success on your show, Josh. So if I'm Kirby Smart, I want to get Derek Cooper to announce on the On3 YouTube channel to make his decision.
Yeah, and he, like I said, he might not be the last Georgia Bulldog to commit. Hopefully we get Derek Cooper. But on Thursday, we have wide receiver Craig Dandridge out of the state of Georgia. And it seems like if anybody's going to pull him out, it could be Oklahoma here.
Yeah, they got the last OV. Obviously, they're known for offense, and they have a need at wide receiver. They obviously have big commitment in Bo Bentley there as well. That'll appeal to a lot of offensive weapons for Brent Venables and company, but he will be hard to pull out of the state of Georgia. I've always kind of viewed this as Georgia versus Georgia Tech the last couple of months, and he took OVs to both Athens and the Flats in Atlanta. Look, Georgia has become the team to beat. Throughout the spring, James Coley made him a top priority. He ran a 10.8 in track. Last season, coming off some injuries, he had 1,400 yards receiving, 15 touchdowns, shows speed, plays fast, plays big, and became a guy that Georgia wants and hopes to add in this class. And right now, just a day or two out from that commitment, I like where Georgia sits here for the in-state target.
A lot of dog fans in the chat again. All right. Big announcement today. PJ Dean is going to make his decision on June 30th. Elite defensive lineman. At one point, a lot of people thought he was trending towards the Buckeyes, but as we get closer and closer, does it feel like Georgia's going to win out here?
Yeah, they have a better shot to me, according to intel now, than maybe if you asked me a month and a half ago. Georgia's always been in this. Obviously, they have the brother connection. Jared Wilson played at Georgia, started last year for 1 year, goes and gets drafted into the NFL. So obviously, Georgia's been in this recruitment from day one. Like you said, Ohio State kind of set the pace, back in the spring and getting him in Columbus and made a very big impact there. He moved from offensive line to defensive line. Larry Johnson made a big impression there. But coming down to the final days, it looks like an SEC battle between Georgia and South Carolina. Obviously, Shane Beamer would love to get him in Columbia. Right now, we're hearing a little bit more about maybe Georgia and their chances late in this race from Trey Scott and his D-line development, how comfortable he is in Athens being around his brother and his family over the last 3 or 4 years there at Georgia. So Georgia has a real shot to land another big one here, but I'm not sleeping on South Carolina in this race either.
All right, let's talk about tight end Caden Prothrow, the 5-star tight end out of the state of Georgia. Did Texas do enough on that final official visit to make this one interesting, or is this all dog?
Yeah, I mean, Texas never hurts itself on visits. I promise you that. Whether it be guys like Vodney Cleveland getting in Lamborghinis and taking photo shoots, or showing the 40 acres of Austin, Texas, and just what they can do not only on the field but off the field. Texas is a huge brand, and tough to deal with if you're a team in recruiting right now. But Georgia, obviously, their trump card here is Caden Prothrow is an in-state kid. He's been to Georgia 10 plus times. Texas got in this later than most other schools on his list, but they've done enough to get into at least his top three. Right now, it's Georgia, Florida, and Texas in that top three. But I think the top one right now is the University of Georgia. Again, goes back to his familiarity with Athens, been there a lot. Obviously, Todd Hartley, that relationship, that tight end production, how they're used in the offense at that position. And he knows a lot of players on that team. There's a lot of commits in this class. So I think all those things combined put Georgia in a good spot for a July announcement for Caden Prothrow.
All right. Now we got to wrap this up with a little Tyler Atkinson conversation. Kind of, piggybacks off of what we were just talking about with Prothrow. He took that final official visit to Texas. He trains out in Texas. Is this shaping up to be maybe a Justice Terry type recruitment, or do you like where the dogs sit right now?
Well, if it's Justice Terry, like, the Georgia fans want to turn off the tube right now and quit watching this show, because they have a very bad memory of what happened with Justice Terry, who was an obviously pivotal recruit in that class last year that they lost to Texas on the day that he announced his decision. Look, again, you can't rule out Texas for anyone. If they get them on campus, they're in play, and they are in play for Tyler Atkinson. I think Tyler's one that will draw this out a little bit longer in the summer than a lot of these guys we're talking about, in this show. I see him being a lot like, unless something changes, a lot like KJ Bolden was, when he made his decision that early August, that first or second week, right before the senior season starts at Grayson High School. That's what I'm getting from that camp about decision timeline. And between now and then, I'm being told a lot of discussions will be had, from whether it be about NIL, final questions about defensive fit, scheme, where can he play, and does the branding come into it? The acting up is his brand. He's an Adidas guy. Obviously, these schools on his radar are Nike schools. What does that mean for him and his branding? But I don't think Georgia has hurt itself at all over the last month. They had a great official visit. I was told they couldn't even put into words how Georgia made them feel when they were in Athens, Georgia, that 48 hours earlier this month. So, look, Texas is in this, Oregon, Clemson. You can't rule out Ohio State. I think there's still a decision to be made, but we've seen Georgia as the team to beat and the team setting the pace in this race from the beginning. And I've heard nothing to take me away from that. Now, is the decision final? No, each school will have one or two, maybe even three more chances to make an impression through Zoom, over the phone, FaceTime, however it may be. But we like where Georgia's been and where they are for Tyler Atkinson.
All right, Georgia fans, exciting times. The dogs are on a run, and there's a lot going on here on the On3 Recruit channel. So hit subscribe, because that way you get those notifications when we go live for these commitments. I don't want you to miss any of them. Hit subscribe for me, please. All right, let's talk a little Alabama Crimson Tide. We got two top 100 recruits making their decision tomorrow. That'll be Thursday, depending on when you're watching this. Tight end Max Sutter and running back Xavier Crowell. Chad, could Bama land them both?
It's lining up with what could be potentially a great day in Tuscaloosa, a.k.a. T-Town, for those that follow the Alabama Crimson Tide. We'll start with the in-state running back. Obviously, he's an elite player, had all the offers from top programs in the country, reclassified from 2027 to 2026, and has been really Bama's guy. I would say number one running back target this cycle. Xavier Crowell goes by EJ, and from Jackson, Alabama, state championship team a year ago, has been to Alabama numerous times, has real deep, genuine relationships there with the people in Tuscaloosa. It starts with Robert Gillespie, Coach G, super close to Crowell. And look, I just think Alabama, everybody's taking their shot, from Florida State to Georgia to Texas to Auburn. Other schools tried to get him on campus, tried to become a factor, but The consistent on my end has been Alabama is going to be tough to beat. I've heard nothing different leading up to this decision, and I like where Alabama sits. Going over to Max Sutter, an NFL legacy guy. His dad played at Northwestern. He's from up in the Midwest, and obviously Illinois has been pushing hard here late, trying to convince him to stay closer to home in Champaign. Ole Miss, another SEC program, but talking to Mac and covering his recruitment, over the last year to year and a half, one thing's been consistent with me is that he loves SEC football, and that starts no bigger than Alabama. Their tradition, their history, their championship program, their production, how they use the tight end. He has a great connection with Brian Ellis, the tight ends coach in Tuscaloosa. So right now, just a day or so out, everything's lining up, in the right way for Alabama fans to get good news from Max Sutter. Again, Illinois is pushing; they won't give up. Ole Miss has been a school to watch, but right now nothing's changed the pulse on my end from Alabama setting the pace here.
All right, more in-state 5-stars I want to talk about. We got Cedarian Morgan coming off the board July 2nd. And then also we have Tank Jones, and he's been around. I don't know exactly when Tank Jones plans to make a decision, but where do you see Alabama with these two elite in-state 5-stars?
Yeah, I think they're in a good spot. I'd say a little bit better in my eyes for Cedarian Morgan than Tank Jones. Not that they're in a bad spot for Tank Jones, but I think a little bit better, maybe a little bit more separation from them and everybody else with Morgan. I think Florida's still the biggest competition for Morgan. Auburn's tried to make a move, another in-state school there. Obviously, Georgia got an OV as well. But look, he grew up a Bama fan. His family likes Alabama. He's been there a lot. He likes Kalen DeBoer, the culture around. I mean, how all the recruits are so interactive on these visits. And one key one for a guy like Morgan is Ryan Williams, who's been front and center every official visit. He's been around every top recruit, telling them what Alabama's like, what he got to do last year as a true freshman. If you didn't know, he was 17 years old last year too, as well as a freshman in Alabama doing what he did. I just think too many things are in favor for Alabama for me to kind of shape it, go in a different direction. I think Bama's in for some good news here unless something major changes in the final hours. With Tank Jones, this one to me, I think still feels like Alabama's to lose, but I think it's gotten a little bit tighter than what we thought it would be if you go back 6 months or a year ago, to where, again, like Morgan, Tank was a big Alabama fan growing up. He's been there a dozen or more times to Tuscaloosa. He likes the people in the program, the people in the building, but he's made multiple trips to Aggieland at Texas A&M, multiple trips to the Pacific Northwest, University of Oregon. He's been down to Miami a couple of times, and all of those schools have given him something to think about. I'm hearing a little bit more about Texas A&M and Oregon than I am with Miami, but they're not giving up either. But I still like Alabama's position. There's no commitment date set. We think it'll happen sometime in July based on what we're hearing. We like Alabama as the lead school, but there's others to watch very closely as well, that decision.
Yeah, and it just feels like this summer rain at Alabama is about to begin. I mean, you got Crowell, you got Cedarian Morgan, also trending for Jaira Edwards. Is this Kalen DeBoer? Do you think that Kalen DeBoer could legitimately make a run at a top 3 class, maybe number 1 class this cycle?
Yeah, it starts with the guys, Josh, that we just talked about. To me, everything rests on the success in their home state with those 3 guys we just talked about, starting with Crowell, then Morgan, then Tank Jones. If they go 3 for 3 there, they could be on their way to ascending up the team rankings this summer. And obviously, you mentioned a guy like Jaira Edwards, an elite safety who had multiple programs, national powers, knocking at his door, Georgia, Texas A&M, Oregon, top programs across the country were trying to get Jaira Edwards. We like where Alabama sits. He took that OV to Alabama and really kind of shut his recruitment down without making that announcement of a commitment. We like where Alabama sits after that visit. He was supposed to be in Oregon that next week, never took that trip. Tuscaloosa has been a place he's been a few times. He has good connections there. He likes how they play freshmen in the secondary. That appeals to him. So look, Bama can be definitely on their way to another top-ranked class if everything falls the way it should. And again, it starts, we like where they're at for Edwards, a top guy up in Baltimore. But to me, a lot hinges on what happens with those in-state kids, Crowell, Morgan, and Jones.
Bama fans, talk to Chad and I. How are we feeling right now about this 2026 class? And how do you feel about these 5 stars? Let us know in the comment section below. All right, let's talk a little bit of intel that Chad Simmons got coming out of the Rivals 5-Star Challenge. It was held in Indianapolis. Chad was boots on the ground there for a couple days. Chad, we're going to start with elite running back Derek Cooper. There's been some buzz around his recruitment. Number 3 running back in America. Set the table for us.
Yeah, obviously the decision date's set for July here in a couple of weeks. I mean, he made it pretty clear that the decision is not final in his mind. He'll have some big discussions with the people in his circle and then the schools that are still in play. Obviously, we have to start with Miami, the school in his hometown, in his backyard. They got the last official visit. We know they're recruiting him as hard as anyone. We feel they will be tough to beat. We think a team or two that could beat them would be Georgia and Ohio State. He showed up in Ohio State, hat. He had some Georgia gloves at the 5-star camp on Tuesday. He had Ohio State cleats on as well. But look, we know Miami's there. Georgia, we feel the buzz is real. We think the communication is strong there. His mom's been there. He's been there for a short amount of time. He was committed to Georgia early in his recruitment as well. Ohio State is pushing hard. We're told not to sleep on Florida State. Alabama's in this, but right now we think it's Miami, Georgia, and Ohio State for Derek Cooper.
All right. How about the number 3 offensive tackle in America, Felix Ojo, out of the state of Texas? He got real honest with you when he talked to you at the 5-Star Challenge.
Yeah, Texas and Ohio State. Look, he's just came off the Utah OV. He's been to Ole Miss, Florida, Michigan, many other schools. And other schools are in communication, but he said, look, it's really 2 teams at the top. Could that change? Sure. But I don't think it will. I think Ohio State is and has been the biggest competition for Texas. I think Texas will be tough to beat. Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood, that staff, highly involved with him. Not just him, but also recruiting his family. They're an in-state program for Ojo, and they're selling him on a chance to be like Kelvin Banks, come in and be a day one guy and maybe anchor that offensive line as a true freshman. So that appeals to him. Of course, the location does too. So NIL will be a factor. We know Texas will go big there if they need to. And I think Texas will be tough to beat.
All right, let's talk about 5-star tight end Caden Prothrow, the number 29 overall ranked prospect in America. Dog fans got a vote of confidence this week when they saw you and Steve Wiltfong drop RPM picks in favor of UGA. What did he say to you guys on the ground there that got you guys going in the Dogs' direction?
I think really, Josh, just a long time coming on something like that, to be honest. We've been kind of painting the picture for a while, both Steve and myself, about Georgia being the in-state school, the team he's been to the most as far as visits go. The relationships there are real with Todd Hartley and Mike Bobo and the staff there. And I think for me, speaking on my pick, just kind of getting that FaceTime with Prothrow and kind of reading him and kind of getting a feel for how he says what he says about Georgia and other schools, and the commitment date being set now, I think, for July 12th. And I just think just the feeling that he gave combined with what we already knew over the last 6 to 12 months led us to that prediction. And we feel Georgia will be tough to beat.
All right. Now you talk to edge Jake Cruel, who's the number 7 ranked edge in the country, number 37 overall. So borderline 5-star prospect here. Out of IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida, but you got him trending out of state.
Yeah, Oklahoma, obviously, Steve made the pick there. I'm not ready to go in on that. That one, to me, based on what everything Jake told me and talking to his people in Indianapolis, is this recruitment will go into the season. He'll go to some games in the fall. He wants to see what teams perform well, how his position plays. Maybe how some like Oklahoma was the pick for Steve, or is the pick for Steve, and that would be my pick today. And that's kind of been our pick as far as the trendsetter, as far as the school leading the way for some time. But he wants to see how Venables does as the head coach / DC this year, how guys do off the edge in his defense. And I think a school that really intrigues him too is Florida. What they do coming off last year, finishing strong with Billy Napier. But Florida, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Texas are the 4 schools to watch in this race. He plans to see games at all 4 schools in the fall. If there is a team to beat, like Steve said, heading into the season as of right now, it's Oklahoma.
All right, let's move on to cornerback Samari Matthews, top 10 corner in America out of Huntersville, North Carolina. And he's been taking some visits. Most recently, he was at Texas. He's been to Auburn. How do you see this recruitment shaping up?
FSU's trying to hang on in here and be in a top 3 race, but right now it's South Carolina and Texas battling, SEC style. Columbia versus Austin. Does he stay close to home and play for Shane Beamer, who's been with him for 2 years recruiting him? He's been there countless times. He knows the place, the Columbia place. He knows the staff. He knows the team. He knows a lot of commits. Or Texas came in, offered him this spring, got in this late, got him on campus, blew him away this spring, got him on the OV, built up that momentum. But then South Carolina came back and got the last OV this past weekend. Look, I give Texas the slightest of edges. Steve and I both made the pick for Texas being the team to beat. Let me stress that, the team to beat. I don't think this is a final decision with Texas. Could they get him in July? Absolutely. But South Carolina still is right there, very close. Again, slight edge to Texas. Mark Orphy has done a great job recruiting him there. But look, Shane Beamer, a lot of times when he goes all in, gets his guys like Samari Matthews, this will be a race to watch up into the finish line.
All right. One more big-time athlete. We're talking Joel Wyatt, 6'4", 200 pounds, out of Bell Buckle, Tennessee. Can the Vols hang on and keep him in state?
Yeah, in-state battle. Somebody's going to hang on in-state. It's going to be either Clark Lee or Josh Heupel. And at different times, we've thought Tennessee led. Vandy made a big push over the spring, early in the summer. Tennessee gets that last OV. It's kind of swung back Tennessee's way. The big question for Joel has been, where do I want to play? Not just city or team, but position. Vanderbilt's telling him receiver, maybe corner, maybe both ways. Vanderbilt's saying linebacker, kind of growing into your body, a place he hasn't played before. That's giving him a little bit of hesitation about Tennessee, about the fit. How does his body grow? Does he like their vision? Right now, I'm leaning towards Tennessee and kind of him going in with the Vols, but Clark Lee and that staff in Nashville are not making it easy on Heupel and company.
All right. Great intel coming out of the 5-Star Challenge. Chad Simmons, appreciate you.
Thank you.